In this video today, we're going to be showing you how to store SSIS configuration inside SQL Server. We're going to be using a three-part configuration where we utilize an environment variable held on the server which points to the location of a .dtsconfig file, which is an XML config file that holds the connection string information to a table within SQL Server. The SQL Server table holds the config for the rest of the items within the package. So a two-part config would be simply creating a .dtsconfig XML file. This tells SSIS how to connect to SQL Server. Within SQL Server, we've got an SSIS configurations table which holds configuration information for the objects within the SSIS package, such as variables, connection strings for connection managers, etc. Take it one step further by actually having an environment variable which points to the location of this .dtsconfig file. So the same applies. The first part of the video, we're actually going to create the .dtsconfig file. Then we're actually going to change package configurations so that we actually utilize the environment variable. Okay, let's have a look in bids. Here's our package. We've got no package configuration set at the moment. So what we're going to actually have to do, it's import.dtsx. So what we're going to do is create a OLEDB connection. This is going to be the connection manager that holds the SQL Server config. I've got one set up. Let's just rename this actually to CM SQL Config, but as you can see, testing the connection there, that works fine. Let's rename this now CM SQL Config, because that's the name of the connection manager that we're actually going to hold the configuration for in the XML file. So that's that created. Now we can go into package configurations and we can actually create the xml.dts config file. This is simply done by enabling package configurations and creating it. I'm going to create it into data training SSIS config. I'm going to call it SQL config connection. Click save. Yep. Next, what we're actually going to do is tell SSIS what pieces of config we actually want to store in there, and that's the initial catalog and the server name of the SQL connection manager, and we'll just call this XML config. Click finish, and then we should be able to have a look in the operating system, file system, where the file's been created. Yep, as you can see, let's edit this file, let's have a look at it and see what's in there. We'll have to open that with, let's say, Notepad or something like that. Okay, let's try and find Notepad. Down here somewhere. Okay, there it is. Let's open it with Notepad. It'll be one long string. Let's try formatting this a little bit better so you can actually see some of the config items within the file. Scroll along a bit. Okay, so starting to get to the interesting bits, the configs. So you can see there's CM SQL config. That's telling it the name of the connection manager, and that's telling it what property you're actually configuring. So that's the initial catalog, and then underneath that, as you can see, it says training destination. Next bit of config is CM config again, and it's the server name. And again, let's just hit return on that and bring that one round. Yeah, that's the name of our server. So you can see the name of the server, SQL Server that we're connecting to, name of the database that we're connecting to, and that's the file. That's all the config file holds, is a connection string to SQL Server. That tells SSIS where to find the rest of the config that we're actually going to populate. Okay, let's come out of there, back to bids. Okay. So let's have a look at package configs. Now we're going to actually utilize an environment variable. I've had an environment variable set up already on the system. Before we go there, let's just have a quick look and check what it's actually called. So let's bring up the environment variables server properties. Let's have a look. see what it's called. So on the server, under advanced, and then environment variables, a bit further down, you can see I've created one up called SSIS Config file. Let's have a look at that. It's called config connection, not SQL config connection. Okay, so let's go back and change that, rename that file from SQL config to config connection. Okay, that's better. So the environment variable points to the location of that file. That file then has a pointer, a connect string to SQL Server. So what we're going to do is within this package, we're going to say the environment variable holds the location of a config file that we're interested in. That's it. Next, next, and finish. So that's an environment variable. Now pointing at that config file holds the connect string for CM SQL Config Connection Manager. Okay. What we're going to do now is create another connection manager. This is going to be for our file import package. This is going to be the destination, the SQL destination. So we're going to import stuff from a file later on, and this is going to be the destination. So rename that to training destination. So what we need to do now is store the connect string information. First of all, let's create a variable for the file path, which is where the files are actually going to reside. So we'll call this file path. It's a string. Oops. No, it's a string. There we go. And let's give it a value of C:\, backslash data, and another backslash. Okay, so we've got a destination SQL connection manager and a variable. In package configurations now, we're going to add a second piece of configuration, but this is going to be a SQL Server configuration type. It's going to be via that connection, CM SQL connection, and we're going to create a new table called SSIS configurations, which is going to hold the configuration information. So click OK on that. And our filter for this package, let's just call it something like file import. So that will give us a unique set of rows that are just for this package and this package only. And what we're going to store in there, let's store in the training destination, server name and initial catalog. Okay, that'll do for the time being. Click next, and let's just call this SQL config. And that's it, that's done. So that will have written a connect string into the SQL Server table that's pointed to by that environment variable. Let's have a look, refresh this. Yeah, so refresh, let's have a look. So we should have a table in there now. Yeah, drag that across. So the environment variable points to the .dtsconfig. That points to the server where we're holding the rest of the config, and within that table of SSIS configurations, we're holding config for a different connection manager. It's called training destination. We're holding the server name and initial catalog. As you can see, the values in the configured value column. Okay, what we've forgotten to do is add in our variable. So let's go back to bids, and we'll actually open up the package configs again and add in the file path. So highlight that one and edit it, click next, next again, and then where's the variable for file path? Let's have a look. Oh, it must be at the top. Okay, now there it is. So for file path, and we're actually going to store the value in our SQL Server table. Click finish, close. Okay, chaps, here we are. Run this again. We should have 3 pieces of config in there. As you can see, file importer, C:\data, and then that's the user variable file path, and then the value. And that's really storing SSIS configuration in a SQL Server table.